A lot of companies plan April Fool's pranks as a marketing tactic. On today's episode of For Immediate Release, we're going to tell you about a company that opted for an April Fool's non-prank. We'll explain, so stick around. Another fine podcast from the FIR Podcast Network.
This is For Immediate Release, the podcast for communicators.
Welcome to episode number 244 of For Immediate Release. I'm Neville Hobson.
And I'm Shell Holtz. And today we're going to talk to you about an April Fool's joke that, one, worked, and two, wasn't an April Fool's joke. So it's funny, Neville, we were going to do an episode on April Fool's jokes. We were going to talk about brands doing April Fool's jokes and whether that was a good idea. And if you were going to do it, how to do it right and what type of traps to avoid. And other stuff came up and we ended up recording episodes about those things. And we just let the April Fool's thing fall by the wayside. But then I read this article. I read this article in about 15 different places, but the one we're talking about is on the PR Daily website. And this is about Twitter. And on April 1st, they tweeted, "We are working on an edit button." That was the entire tweet. And everybody thought it was an April Fool's joke. Now, everybody has been asking for an edit button for a long time. The idea that you can't go back into one of your tweets and change it strikes a lot of people, myself included, as absurd. But this is something they have not allowed. They've let you delete a tweet. Once upon a time, you couldn't even do that. But you've been able to delete a tweet for a long time now. And if you found that you had a typo or had misstated something, your link was bad, you had to delete it and reissue it, which meant all of the conversation that had been attached to the initial tweet was just gone. So this is something people have been asking for. And they put this tweet out and everybody says, it's just a joke. But it got a lot of attention. It got 1.3 million likes. It had 58,000, almost 59,000 replies. It got around. The reach of this thing was incredible, probably because people were saying, look, they're joking about it, but they really ought to do it. And it turned out that they're really doing it. It wasn't a joke. Twitter comms tweeted later on April 5th, now that everyone is asking, yes, we've been working on an edit feature since last year. No, we didn't get the idea from a poll. We're kicking off testing within Twitter Blue Labs in the coming months to learn what works, what doesn't, and what's possible. So they used April Fools to get everyone to think it was a joke in order to get them to pay attention to it. And it worked. It was very effective. On PR Daily, Allison Carter, who wrote the article about this, said, here's why it worked so well. One, it was the right message and medium for the target audience. Two, it got the edit button into the conversation before the main announcement. Three, it extended the reach. And four, they followed up with real answers. So as April Fool's pranks go, this one was pretty effective, even though it wasn't actually an April Fool's prank.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's right that many people have been complaining about what you just described, that you couldn't edit it. I've not been part of that group, by the way. I've thought, fine, so just delete it and do it again. But your point is valid, particularly about if there's been a lot of conversation going on, you kind of miss all of that. But it's also not the most tidy way of going about this, right? So this is interesting for all the things you've outlined. I think if this had happened at any other time, it wouldn't have got the attention it did. And that's not to do with April Fool. I think it's a lot to do with recent events regarding Elon Musk who bought a nearly 10% shareholding in Twitter, which gave him a lot of rights. And then he was invited to be on the board. That was news headlines for some time. Even more headlines erupted when he just changed his mind and said he's not going to be on the board. A lot of speculation around that, some alleging that he couldn't pass the background checks. I mean, whatever it was, he's not. So the further speculation now is that, he could launch a full-scale hostile takeover bid for Twitter. Buying Twitter for a man of the richest man in the world with trillions or whatever he's got, it's like petty cash, I would imagine. So this is, I think, also driving a lot of the conversation subsequent to the April the 1st tweet, the subsequent conversation about it all, the speculation surrounding all this. So he could be a driver for it. Nevertheless, I think PR Daily's assessment's a good one, that if they had planned this way, and by the way, they're not saying a word whether they did or not. This is pure speculation that they did it like this. But if they did, then kudos to their communicators. They did a good job.
Yeah, my guess is that they knew exactly what they were doing, putting this out on April 1st in particular. There's a second part, by the way, about exploring the edit feature. Jay Sullivan at Twitter said, edit has been the most requested Twitter feature for many years. People want to be able to fix sometimes embarrassing mistakes, typos, and hot takes in the moment. They currently work around this by deleting and retweeting again, just what we said. But you're absolutely right. If this had come out after the whole Elon Musk kerfuffle, it would have been lost in the flood of messaging around Musk. I've read some interesting takes on his potential hostile takeover of Twitter. They're saying that the people at Twitter probably hate the idea, but shareholders probably love it because every company he has owned has done very, very well. Twitter, on the other hand, has sort of languished in terms of its profitability. So investors may be looking for that. But in the meantime, I'm looking forward to being able to edit my tweets.
Yeah, I think one interesting thing about this, just to put the PR element aside for a second, I read a really interesting piece in Fast Company today, actually, that is a lengthy analysis of what exactly we're talking about when we say an edit button. And I think this is actually a very thought-provoking piece, because what do we actually want to be able to do with this? Their articles talking about how, in fact, the headline, how to design the most controversial button on the internet and not screw it up. That's actually a really good starting point to what they're talking about. They're quoting a number of individuals in their article, including the guy who invented the undo send in Gmail. That lets you do that. Now, that works by delaying the send. It doesn't actually go and it brings it back. It just delays it. Now, actually, it's quite a useful feature. I have that enabled in my email, which isn't Gmail directly, but it pumps it in from Gmail. A number of times that I've sent something, I thought, damn, I meant to include X, or, oh, I didn't mean to say that, and I can retrieve it. It's like 10 seconds. So the article, though, goes into the whole notion of responsible editing. And someone's come up with an idea, I thought, could this work? Which addresses the point that some people say it's so great having an edit button, but you want to see what the edits were. And so they talk about Facebook, about Slack that does this. Can you see what the original was? No, you can't. All you've got is a little word edited in brackets at the end of the message. Is that what this would look like? Would it look like, and someone's done a mock-up, including an animation, as it were, of a tweet that's been edited, a bit like tracked changes in a Word document. Is that what we want, where you can still see the original that's been struck through and new text? Is that what it's like? But the point I got from this was I'd not thought about this way before. I thought, edit, I just type it up and send it out again. It actually is not quite as simple as that, I think. And I think this is really, really useful to see this. If this is going to be part of the focus on this, and if people are able to discuss all these aspects, that would help Twitter then implement whatever it is they're going to be testing. This is good in that case. So you could argue then that the faux April 1 tweet, April Fool's tweet, that generated all this attention and other people's opinions has actually kicked off something pretty interesting, and that surely has got to be beneficial for Twitter.
Yeah, I'll have to read that, and you'll send me that link so I can include it in the show
I did
notes,
already
right?
on Slack, in our Slack channel, by the way.
Oh, good. Okay. And yeah, the reason it's interesting is because when I think of editing, I think of the fact that I can edit my Facebook posts easily. So there's certainly an infrastructure difference here between how Facebook handles its messages and how Twitter does. But there's also the fact that a lot of world leaders and business leaders are on Twitter. And if they say something untoward, they'll delete those, but somebody will have already captured it. Right.
Well, it's actually interesting that's a point made in the Fast Company article, but not quite in that same way. That they mention Twitter's become the de facto communications platform for public figures. They say in high stakes moments, example, when Trump tweeted praise for insurrectionists who stormed the US Capitol last year, edited tweets need to be understood at a glance, and burying changes deep in the UI doesn't make a lot of sense for a platform that's designed to be skimmed. That's an interesting distinction. Putting that against Facebook, for instance, these are posts. These are things that are typically take a bit of time to craft. Plus, you're not restricted with 280 characters. You've got about 1,400 or so. That's very different to this. And I think this is a really good point, that tweets aren't like an essay you sit and relaxedly read. These are skimmed. And I think that's an interesting distinction. So this undoubtedly is going to be part of the experimentation and the feedback that we get.
Yeah, I'm sure that that's one of the things they're looking at. And listeners, we'd be interested to know what you would want to see in an edit button on Twitter. So let us know. And that will be a 30 for this episode of For Immediate Release.